Hello, thank you for listening. This is the Friendly Reminder Podcast. It's your weekly friendly reminder of what's going on around the world, in our lives, and everything in between. My name is Gus, and I'm here to discuss, and I'll be your host for the evening. I do have my two. Yeah, I know, nailed it. And I do have my two good friends joining me as always. Sam, how are you today?
I'm doing really good. Anxious to get ready.
Me too. Well, then let's get started. And joining us today is also Daniel. How are you?
Good, Gus. Thanks for having me on.
Of course. It is August the 7th. It is a Friday, everybody. It's a Friday evening. We're going to let our hair down. We're going to relax. And we're going to talk about all the terrible things going on in the world right now. I'm just kidding. Well, somewhat kidding. But I want to get started, but just a little update. I did mention last week that we were hopefully going to come back around and talk about Joe Biden's vice presidential pick. Well, there is no pick as of yet. He has not selected his vice presidential pick. He has not given us any info or anything to really follow up on, except maybe some regrettable.
Well, there was no Joe Biden news at all this week. Nothing happened. Nothing. Didn't say anything. Didn't say anything embarrassing about Black people being less diverse than Hispanic people. But then he apologized, or
he didn't apologize. He clarified.
He said, "I'm sorry that you felt that I said something wrong.
I'm sorry you get so easily offended, you snowflake."
He said, "Come on, man. And you know what?
It's just now his slogan, right?
Yeah.
2020. Come on, man.
So, I mean, I should mention, in case people don't know what I'm talking about, Joe Biden did pretty much put his foot in his mouth by, I don't have the exact quote here with me, so I'm just going to try to paraphrase, but he says that unlike black voters, Latinos are more diverse. I believe what he was trying to say, they're more diverse in their beliefs. I'm not really going to try to explain it. I don't want to put my own foot in my own mouth. So
I also don't think he used the word voters, which changes the meaning of that just a little more.
I don't have the quote here, so I could bring it up. Do you guys want me to bring it up?
Sure. No, we should just kind of,
just move on.
Look, it's Biden. You gotta love him. And I mean that literally. You gotta love him because the alternative is not a viable option. So, I congratulate him on
option for us. It's not a viable option for us.
I'm just gonna say, because I just found it real quick. He said, and by the way, what you all know, but most people don't know, is unlike the African American community, with notable exceptions, the Latino community is an incredibly diverse community with incredible different attitudes about different things. So, yeah.
Well,
you guys
and now we're all going to defend that, right?
Yeah, we're just going to try to extrapolate what he means. And obviously what he means is well-meaning, and he loves us all very much.
I love him. Vote Joe Biden. All right, anyway.
But that's not really our main topic for today because, everything Joe Biden does, Donald Trump can do better. And in this case, he can do a way more insane interview than that, which did happen. He did sit down with, what's his name?
Jonathan Swan.
Jonathan Swan.
Australian.
He's Australian or English or Irish or... Oh, I probably shouldn't say that. Those all sound the same to me. All right.
They're not diverse enough for you?
We'll edit it. We'll edit that out, or I'm going to get canceled. All right.
So, he did sit down with Jonathan Swan of Axios. It was an HBO interview. Oh, boy. I mean, I don't even know where to get started. He said quite a few things. I mean,
he lied. Okay.
No, hold on. Because I just want to get started with my favorite one. My favorite part is... Jonathan Swan was asking him about, America's handling of the pandemic, specifically asking him if he thought it was a good idea to hold a rally in the middle of July. And he said, it's 6,000 people. Donald Trump was like, actually, it was 12,000
Yeah.
people. Then you misreported it. So
that yes.
I
It
don't
was
think
like
he was.
you lying media. You didn't talk about the kissing booths. You didn't talk about the way that everybody was just hugging on each other.
And that
Idiot.
it was
Yeah,
Fox's
we
like
had a
number one show
Yeah.
or something, or number one.
Yeah, he said he had the biggest ratings. We had a
Yeah.
tremendous
He was like,
crowd.
the CDC cited us as the number one disease vector in that area.
Yeah.
So I'll have you know, we had a big old crowd.
And he did talk about, you know, our handling, America's handling of COVID-19. There was an exchange in which he was handing Jonathan Swan a couple of charts, and Jonathan Swan, you know, he did understand what was going on. What Donald Trump was citing was um, deaths compared to cases.
Right.
In which Jonathan Swan responded was like, well, why don't we do deaths compared to population? Because we're on that end, we're much higher than South Korea, Germany, other countries. And Donald Trump basically said, well, no, you can't do that.
Yeah.
You can't do that.
Which
It's not
okay,
allowed.
maybe I'll give some credit, because when analyzing death to cases, America does do very, very well. And I'm obviously not an expert, but maybe
Gus,
something that.
why are you doing this? Why are you defending this man? And look,
I'm not
all I'm
defending the
saying
man.
is
I'm
if
not defending
Trump
the man.
hands you a little piece of paper with a graph on it, that information it's going to be right. You just know it's reliable. There's no way it's bullshit. There's no way this idiot who just lies every 2 seconds is just handing you garbage. But it was amusing to see him on a tiny little chair just handing out pieces of paper to Jonathan Swan, trying to. Oh, okay,
What
go
I
back to
like,
defending
look,
Donald Trump. What you
I'm
were
not
doing.
defending what I am trying to say is what that means is that obviously the United States does have great physicians, great doctors, great nurses, great facilities, and in some areas, not necessarily in all areas. Nobody was ever disputing that, though, and then that's the problem with Donald Trump's case. I mean, we know we have great doctors, we know we have great healthcare workers and great nurses, great hospitals in some areas. That's not what the issue is. The issue is that we let this spread like wildfire. When it comes to policy, that's where the death by population and the fact that we just have these insane number of cases every single day, that's a failure in policy. That's a failure in leadership. That's a failure of government, federal government, state governments, local governments. But really, it starts at the top. So yeah, it's great that our deaths by cases is relatively low. It's great that we have those hardworking physicians, healthcare workers, doctors, nurses doing an outstanding job. That's not any credit to Donald Trump. That's him just trying to find an out. So that's my main point.
Didn't he, when Jonathan Swan was like, well, didn't 1,000 people die yesterday? 1,000 Americans die. And Trump was like,
every day
it is what it
1,000
is.
Americans die.
Yeah, I think that was really
but it was actually 2,000. It was 2,000 yesterday. I noticed, but that's
Really.
But he said 1,000. Yeah, he said 1,000 Americans died yesterday, and Donald Trump said it is what it is, which I was like, yeah, it is what it is. A third of the people who died on 9/11 died, and it is what it is. And it just made me think of those crazy Benghazi slogans where they were like, Hillary died and the Benghazi 3 died, meaning like the 3 people who died in Benghazi died. And I was just thinking, and also 1,000 people died yesterday, and that is what it is.
Yeah, he said they are dying. That's true. And it is what it is. But that doesn't mean we aren't doing everything we can. It's under control as much as you can control it. Right. This is a horrible plague that beset us. So obviously he's not capable of taking any kind of responsibility. He's not going to actually show any kind of regret or introspection. He's just going to come up with excuses, which is essentially what he did throughout this.
He said it's under control as much as it can be under control, as long as you ignore every single other country on earth except for like Brazil, which is doing worse than us.
Yeah, and he did try to mention like, oh, there's flare-ups in Germany or in South Korea, and it's like Jonathan Swan rightly said, well, I mean, they had like 2 deaths yesterday. We had
Yeah, the
thousands of
flare-ups are
deaths.
like, oh, a 20th of the number of deaths that were in like one major U.S. city yesterday. It's not even a. It's funny that the media is even reporting them as like, oh, they're flare-ups because they are so small compared to what's going on in the United States.
Yeah. And it did cover other things. For example, he was asked in regards to the bounties set by Putin and the Russian government. He admitted that he did have a phone call with Putin, and he was asked, did that come up? And he just said, no, we talked about other things.
Well, then didn't he say it was fake news, the bounty thing? He was
Yeah.
like, well, it's fake news. It's fake news.
Yeah.
He's like, Putin wouldn't do that. Putin Putin
Putin
wouldn't. I don't know if
wouldn't
he said
lie to
Putin wouldn't do
me.
that, but he did say it was fake news.
Yeah,
And
he did
also,
say
again, he doesn't care if it's true or not. He cares within the context of what's important to him.
Mm-hmm. And among other things, he also, going back to the Joe Biden thing, Donald Trump is not one to not be one or to not one up Joe Biden. He mentioned, for example, that he's done more than, and this is something he said before, but that he's done more than any other presidents for the African American community. Jonathan Swan mentioned Lyndon Johnson and the Civil Rights Act, which Donald Trump basically did say is like, how has that worked out? If you take a look at what Johnson did, how did that work out? So, which kind of sounds like the president of the United States is just openly musing on whether passing the Civil Rights Act was a good thing or not.
The other thing
Um,
that I liked was when he says positive thinking. He says something about positive thinking is gonna like change all of this.
positive
Or
mental
how?
attitude.
Yeah, positive mental attitude. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, he used the word hope a lot, like I hope it gets better, which Swan did kind of respond to that. He's like, well, don't give me hope, like give me like what do you actually feel wholeheartedly is going to happen? And he just kind of reverted back to saying that he's just hoping things will be better soon. And obviously, right now he's just staying the course. He's not in terms of the response at the very least, the actual healthcare medical response to this. He's not in any way willing to consider any other alternative except opening up. He wants to continue to open up the schools. He's resistant to any kind of idea of closing any kind of business. I mean,
He talked about Jonathan Swan asked him about what history would remember John Lewis for, who was civil rights, marched with MLK, got beat up, got arrested for civil rights. Trump's response, I don't know really. I don't know. I don't know John Lewis. He chose not to come to my inauguration, and he proceeded to mention 3 or 4 more times that, I don't really know John Lewis. He didn't come to my inauguration, which is apparently the only place that Trump could meet someone, which is at his inauguration.
yeah.
But the that's I ridiculous response to that question.
It's like
I like it when he said, "Oh, some people are saying you can test too much." Uh,
yeah,
again, like
I like that part.
he just says whatever, and then who says that? He just said, "Oh, read the manuals, read the books, read the things."
That was my
And Jonathan Swan was like, "Manuals," and he's like, "Read the books, read the books." And Jonathan Swan was like, "What books?"
yeah.
It's a lot of people were praising, and he did deserve some praise because he did a lot more quote unquote fact checking of the president than a lot of people do by like pushing back on just the transparently stupid, dumb, wrong things that he says. But I mean, can you really do that effectively to a guy who's like every other word is just every other thing he says is just false? Or how can you really possibly expect to fact check someone like that, Like, what is a real aggressive interview? I feel like Jonathan Swan should just get up and slap him every time he lies. That's the only thing he can do to like really.
Yeah, but would that even affect anything? He'd still probably lie after a slap to the face.
Well, the Secret Service would probably tackle Jonathan Swan and arrest him. And then
one thing that's not going to come out as we talk or while we talk about it is Trump's demeanor. I think he was like struggling throughout the interview. If you actually, I thought that was a very hard interview to really watch. I don't feel great watching those kind of interviews, watching a man just stumble like through, like just trying to explain the most basic things. I mean that
they had like Swan sitting on like a recliner, and they gave like they gave Donald Trump like the ottoman. They had him sitting on like an ottoman. He was like his little low seat, and he's this big old guy, and he was just like hunched over.
I think it's the terrible same chair. It's just Donald Trump's like a very large.
Was it really?
That's just how he sits.
Yeah, I think it's the same chair. Like, but it just looks it looks so awkward. Because also he like hunches over, and he always looks very nervous and fidgety. I thought that whole manual was like, what manuals? Like, did somebody just? I'm assuming like one of his somebody in the coronavirus task force like just handed him some charts. Here's how you get through the pandemic or something, and that's what he's referring to as manuals. Like, what is he talking about? What books? I'm still wondering what books he's talking about. He didn't cite any.
Yeah, but he doesn't have to because he's the president.
Yeah.
I mean, if you look at the manual, the answer is right there.
Well, so this is one of the reasons that Swan was praised, is that he says this kind of shit, and then nobody pushes back. Yeah. And Swan flummoxed him by saying, "What books are you referring to?" Just absolutely flummoxed this idiot by just saying, like, "Well, which books?" You know, give him the fucking Pulitzer.
How do you not flummox Trump is the question. I mean, it's hard not to not mess him up, because he just messes up on his own by himself all the time.
I do think that it took journalists quite a while to get over the fact that they have to show some kind of respect to the office, and because of that so-called respect, they were very shy about doing basic follow-up questions when Donald Trump would just go on some of his bullshit. I mean, what Swan's doing here is just basic follow-up questions. He's not being particularly an insanely inquisitive journalist here. He's just, I mean, what books? Like, why? When you say, hey, look at the manual, of course you're going to say, what manual? Just tell me what manual you're talking about. And,
well, that is what we on the Republican side like to call a gotcha question. Yes.
Yeah.
You're not allowed to ask, what books am I getting my information from? That's communism. I mean, it's just, you just got to look at the books and the manuals, and the answers are in there.
Honestly, when I finished this interview,
what he probably means is just like Fox News talking points. He doesn't mean actual books.
Is that a book?
What I also noticed was that the graphs that he brought out, it looks like example graphs. It doesn't look like real graphs. It looks like someone just printed them off really quickly and said, "Here, show them this stuff."
Yeah.
I mean, obviously Swan could make something out of it, and he did kind of realize that he was referring to deaths proportionate to cases. Honestly, guys, when I finished this interview, I kind of thought to myself, is there still a point to like parodies or satire? Like, do we even need
so many satires are just transcripts of what he says?
Yeah,
like I feel doing it in like a funny voice.
I feel like Donald Trump has been Jonathan Swifting his way through this entire presidency, and like 40% of Americans are still going like, oh yeah, no, this is my president. This is a smart man. I feel like if Stephen Colbert's character in the Colbert Report was like an actual person, he'd be considered like a centrist intellectual right now, and he'd be like on Bill Maher complaining about cancel culture. Like, I feel like our idea of centrism is just like, so like we're so far gone that even centrism is just like this like really satire of what used to be. I just feel like that's where we are at.
But I do feel like maybe this is too optimistic, but I do feel like a lot of is it still true that some Republicans voted for him, kind of tacitly support him, but like vehemently dislike him and just do it because that's their policies?
I don't know.
I mean, I gotta imagine that's a decent amount. Maybe, I don't know. I go back and forth on this because I used to think that was a lot of people, and then lo and behold, Donald Trump won the election. And then I was like, all right, maybe it's not as many people.
Yeah, I'm
as
not
I thought
sure.
It might be.
Like, I'm not sure what the elite Beltway Republicans are thinking. I mean, obviously, there's the Lincoln Project, and there's a lot of insider Republicans that are trying to work to get Donald Trump out, and there's a whole discussion that you
Never
can have.
Trump Republicans.
Yeah, I think it's.
I mean, I don't.
Steve Schmidt.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Sam.
I don't think Trump was the reason for him winning the election. I think it was more to the fact that Fox and other like conservative media were turning their mind, were like forcing people to believe that Hillary Clinton, was a terrible person, and that's why a lot of them didn't vote for
her.
Yeah, but that's the thing. Like, I mean, we're not.
So that's the question. Well,
just real quick, like, we're not viewing, or we're not having this discussion based on 2016 viewpoints. Like, we've had 4 years of Donald Trump as president, and 4 years of this freaking interview. Like, I mean, again, it's I remember that tweet from for those that
Gus, what part of it is what it is? Do you not understand?
Yeah, I'm just reminded of that saying where it's like, you have to be pretty dumb for people to hear you for 4 years and then still think, damn, that dude is dumb every time you open your mouth.
Every time he opens his mouth.
Yeah, that was me this entire interview.
Damn, that dude is dumb.
Yeah, and I don't know what it says about America when it's like our two presidential candidates, like when you look at their two most recent interviews, how they sound, what they say. I don't want to both sides it either. I still think Joe Biden or Donald Trump makes Joe Biden seem like a luminary and a civil rights champion. But it's still, I don't know. It gives me pause, to say the least. Is there anything else you guys want to discuss about this interview? Anything else you want to point out that I may have missed?
Have you guys seen any conservative, like, what were conservatives saying, like, great job, looking kind of stupid? I mean, I can't imagine people thought he did a good job, right?
I think
or were they like, oh, that Jonathan Swan and his sneaky lying media ways?
I mean, I think Fox can make people believe anything if they made people believe that Trump was presidential.
Yeah, I have not seen any Fox clips or Fox News clips on this. I probably don't have.
Maybe that in and of itself is self-explanatory.
Yeah, I can't imagine Tucker Carlson is like analyzing this. They probably didn't even cover it, to be honest with you. That's what I would bet. It probably didn't get a whole lot of airtime. I think throughout the circles that I partake in, it was reviewed as a pretty negatively towards Donald Trump. But what do I know? I'm in my own little echo chamber, so I don't want to say how it was received by the people.
Has your echo chamber ever given him a positive review?
I think like during that first State of the Union that he gave, like when Van Jones famously said, was it Van Jones that famously said, like, this is the day he became president?
He did say that, but a lot of people have said that. Also, it's kind of like a parody at this point.
I'm telling you, there's no need for parodies anymore. This is it. We're just here. I have to. If this was like Congressman Ryan in Veep and I was just watching a TV show, I would be laughing my ass off. And I still kind of am, but the fact that it's our actual president just fumbling through a basic interview during the middle of a pandemic while our unemployment rate is still in double digits is what I feel you, Michelle Obama. It gives me low-grade depression too.
Yeah.
It's
He also
frightening, for sure.
He also said Thailand, and he also, instead of Yosemite, he was reading it off a teleprompter, and he said Yosemite.
Yosemite.
Look those clips up; they're pretty funny.
But that's
he was
not
like
from an interview, right?
Yosemite. No, they're not. But I thought I would just tack those in. It's just like, hey, these are some
Trumpisms.
funny things. Yeah.
Yeah.
The watching that interview will make you feel pretty bad about America. Watching the smaller videos will make you laugh, but also make you feel bad about America. So
remember
I feel.
Bushisms? I miss
Yes.
Bushisms.
Oh yeah.
Those are endearing.
I miss
now.
Bush.
Yeah, well, I wouldn't go that far.
No, don't do that.
Yeah, no, let's not. But we should move on. I think we've said what pretty much needs to be said about this interview. I recommend our listeners, if you haven't already, to watch it. You can go on YouTube. It's just put Trump Axios HBO. It'll show up. It's about 37 minutes long. It's not the longest interview, so it is cringeworthy. It's hard to get through, but watch it.
It's agonizing.
Yeah, watch it. I mean, you need to see this man for who he is. I'm sure a lot of our listeners already do, but holy cow, does he ever... Like, every time I feel like we've reached peak Trump stupidity, he reminds me that the potential of his stupidity may well be limitless. And
yeah, there is no peak when it concerns Trump.
Yes,
it almost
makes like a
math
equation.
Yeah, but let's move on. Let's go on to our next episode. Thank you guys. That was an entertaining segment. Our next topic, our faithful listeners may have remembered that a couple of 2 weeks ago, I believe, or 3 weeks ago, because we did have that lost episode, we did cover the Civil Rights Act, the history behind it. We have a follow-up now because we did just yesterday pass the anniversary of the Voting Rights Act being signed into law. And Sam, you wanted to talk a little bit about that, right?
Yes. The Voting Rights Act, basically, I mean, as much of you, or I think as most of you know, was to prevent Jim Crow laws, preventing literacy tests from people having, or preventing people from, not preventing them, but letting people vote without having to do literacy tests or other kind of Jim Crow laws. The act contains numerous provisions, some of them which actually regulate elections. Which, when I was reading up on this, I just thought that it was there to stop Jim Crow laws and stop literacy tests and stuff like that. But I didn't know that it actually helped regulate the elections. It provides national protections for voting rights, obviously. Section 2 is a general provision that prohibits every state and local government from imposing any voting law that results in discrimination against racial or language minorities. And to this day, it's still being...
Section 2 has survived thus far.
Yeah, but it's well, I guess I won't get into that part, but it's still being fought off today. Even today, it's still trying to be, dismantled.
Oh yeah, they're fighting over the statute in the courts all the time.
Yeah. Were you gonna say something, Daniel?
No, yeah, I was gonna bring up that I think that the history of it is you were talking about Jim Crow and voting laws, and I think that the interesting thing about that history, it was very much a history of the federal government after the Civil War were empowered by the 14th Amendment and the 15th Amendment basically to make laws that enabled them to help freed slaves and provide for equality. And the 15th Amendment explicitly helped them pass laws about voting. So they would pass laws to prevent these kinds, poll taxes and literacy tests and grandfather provisions, which you're mentioning, that would basically exempt you from the literacy tests and the poll taxes if your grandfather voted. Well, the only people whose grandfather voted were the white people, so they wouldn't have to take the literacy tests and the poll taxes. But anyway, basically what happened is every time Congress outlawed one of these things, the states would find some other way to sort of circle it. Texas, the primaries were whites only. Then the Supreme Court said no, you can't do that, so they made it a private. Well, it's private, so it can be whites only, and that was still the way that they picked the candidate. So it was like a game of, pop the weasel. Is that what the anyway they were? So that's why they passed this act. Sort of, it was necessary to sort of address things all in one comprehensive package. That was so. Yeah, I just wanted to add a little historical background to it.
For that, Daniel. But I was gonna say, it just feels like even with this being done, they keep finding ways to stop people from voting.
Yeah.
Which is insane. Let's see. There's this act also contains, I already talked about that, certain jurisdictions. So a core special provision in Section 5, pre-clearance requirement, which prohibits certain jurisdictions from implementing any changes affecting voting without receiving pre-approval. So that means, like, if there's a new law from the city or from the states that goes against minorities of any kind, the DOJ, the Department of Justice, has to approve it, which I didn't know. That's pretty insane to me.
So it's actually even more extensive than that, because the rule actually requires that every single change in election law of these jurisdictions has to be cleared by either the Department of Justice or the 10th Circuit Court of Appeals, not just the laws that target minorities. Every single election law has. But the DOJ gets to decide, well, does this disenfranchise minorities? If so, they go back to the state and they say you either have to change it or this law is not allowed to go into effect. And the reason they have to be is this sort of prophylactic, this sort of proactive in the way they squash these things is just what I was talking about before. The history of disenfranchisement is a history of always playing catch up, right? And especially when it has to go through the courts, because some of these court cases take months or years. So what'll happen is they'll pass a law, it'll go to the courts. 9 months later, the judge will render a decision invalidating the law. Meanwhile, the law has disenfranchised 40,000 people and they haven't gotten to vote in the last election because in the time the case was pending. So what I'm trying to say is that's why they have these sort of pre-clearance requirements. The reason that pre-clearance is the formula that they use to pick which jurisdictions apply is basically twofold, and that is, did they have restrictions on their voting, like poll taxes and things like that, and are they lower than the average voting registration compared to other similarly situated areas, which it sounds pretty reasonable to me. Basically, do you have a history of this type of discrimination, and do you and as a result of that, you have lower than average voter registration. Then, so this is all a little formal. Really what this is, and it's sort of strange to talk about this, but there's a whole history of legislatures doing this on purpose and being very explicit behind closed doors or in emails that leak or in secret recordings, saying things like, well, yeah, we got to make sure that the blacks don't vote as much, or just being very explicit about we're getting concerned because, they're going to start busing, all the blacks are going to come busing out because they want to vote on this certain provision. Like Gus, I know I was sharing you the other day, just randomly an election official in one of these states thought she was DMing someone about how she was nervous about how all the blacks were getting ready to vote, and accidentally like put it on her Facebook feed like live, and she was an election official in one of these states, and she was like, "Yeah, I'm nervous that all these blacks are registering."
And so by DMing, you mean dungeon mastering, right?
Yeah.
Yes, exactly.
She said it during the session of Dungeons and Dragons.
So it's actually all of this sort of, it's kind of anecdotal, but in 2006, Congress reauthorized the Voting Rights Act, and they did an extremely extensive study. They brought in experts. They released a 6,000-page report talking about, they've had to basically, the DOJ has had to block on average one law a week the entire existence of the Voting Rights Act. These states continue to try to pass laws that make it harder. And again, it's not like they're passing laws that say, well, blacks can't vote. They're closing 300 polling places in poor neighborhoods or African American. It's just the nature of the thing. This country has gotten very good at secretly disenfranchising minorities. So preclearance was needed, and unfortunately, in 2013, the Supreme Court gutted preclearance. I don't know, Sam, do you have more to say about the act generally? Because I was going to get into this terrible Supreme Court decision and shit all over the Roberts Court and any notion that conservatives care about, democracy or fairness or things like that. So, did you have anything else to say about the act itself?
No.
So go ahead.
One other thing about the act I wanted to mention, there is a bailout provision which provides that if one of these jurisdictions that's covered with this preclearance requirement proves that for like a 10-year period they don't pass any super racist laws, they can actually get out from underneath this preclearance requirement. And some jurisdictions have, the vast majority have failed miserably at getting out from there. So they asked the Supreme Court to get them out. And that's what I'm going to talk about next.
What I think you forgot to say is that in 2006, it was widely supported, right? I think you were talking about this earlier.
99-1?
99-1.
It was reapproved 99-1 in the Senate,
which
and some absurd margin in the House. Yeah, you would never think that, and that actually comes up in the oral argument. And when someone brings that up to Scalia says, "Well, yeah, I mean, it's called." This is the kind of thing he says, and I'm paraphrasing. He says, "Yeah, I mean, it's called the Voting Rights Act. You can't be against voting. Like, who's going to vote against voting? And it'll make him sound racist." He also called the Voting Rights Act a racial entitlement. Like this is the type of thing that's going through his head, which is just shows like the least faith in the voter that you could possibly imagine. Like, oh yeah, it's called the Voting Rights Act. Well, yeah, that's, Scalia thinks that's unfair because, it's called voting. You can't be against voting. That's mean. You can't make people vote against voting. Basically, Scalia is an idiot. And
so, do you know who the one person was who didn't vote for it?
Oh, no. Probably Rand Paul? Was Rand Paul? Yeah.
I don't believe
I would guess Rand Paul.
You wouldn't guess like
he wasn't in the Senate.
Orrin Hatch or Mitch McConnell or
no, wouldn't have been Mitch McConnell. But this was like, George W. Bush had a big celebration where he was like, "Oh, I care about voting rights and blah blah blah." Yeah. It was kind of bullshit, but this had popular support. Now, why the Supreme Court decided to gut it shortly after, I'm going to say it probably had something to do with the fact that in 2006 the Voting Rights Act was reauthorized, and in 2008 Barack Obama beat the shit out of the entire GOP and caused a massive upswing in black and minority voter turnout, and they got terrified. And then the Supreme Court was basically like, we should probably do something about this. And so they decided, well, this preclearance thing, there's two parts to the majority's opinion in this case. I'm not going to get deep into it because I frankly think it's a bunch of bullshit, and I think it's pretty clear that the point of this is to make it harder for Democrats to win and make it easier for Republicans to win by making it easier for states to pass laws that disenfranchise the poor and minorities without being explicit about it. So again, as I said, Congress went through some massive fact-finding. John Roberts didn't care. He basically said, well, things have changed. There's almost parity. There's a lot of black lawmakers now. Things have changed, and this formula is old, and we don't think it's fair. And they invoked this thing called the equal sovereignty rule, which is complete and utter garbage. It's not anything that has really ever been invoked. They basically just wanted a way to get rid of it. And they found that this was the best way. And so they said, well, it's so this, and they basically said, well, this formula is it's bad because it's just so old. It's not reliable, completely ignoring the 6,000 page report that Congress put out supporting the formula and why it was still extremely important. Now, I'm not going to get into too deep into the case itself, but I think that right after the pre-clearance requirement was struck down, just to clarify, they didn't strike down the pre-clearance requirement. They actually struck down the formula, which, voids the pre-clearance formula, or voids pre-clearance, just, by its own terms. As soon as the Supreme Court decision was handed down, within 24 hours, all of these states started passing all these laws that they could not get through under the DOJ previously.
Yeah.
And I think the Brennan Center estimates that something like 100,000 voters have been disenfranchised by the decision.
Yeah.
Really?
And I just want to step in real quick and just examples of laws or voter ID laws. Like, for example, there's a law in voter ID law in Texas where a gun license is a valid voter ID, but a college ID is not. Which is,
of course.
Yeah. I mean, who is that going to benefit, right? What party is that going to benefit? A lot of voter purge going on in some states. People being purged as registered voters, and then they're not aware of it, maybe until actual election day, and then at that point they're not able to vote. Just some examples of what's going on in states like Texas, Arizona, Ohio, basically across the board. What I do see here is that and I'm looking at a New York Times article, since the decision, the Shelby County versus Holder decision, virtually all the restrictions put in place were done by Republicans. And sorry to step in, Daniel, go ahead.
No problem. That's I'm looking up some of the effects on this, and it's sort of hard to give broad figures, but yeah, within 24 hours, 3 different states started enforcing their strict photo ID laws that were previously barred by the federal pre-clearance requirement. Yeah, it's just a mess. And it's to be the very annoying thing about this is that this is the exact reason that the law exists. And Ruth Bader Ginsburg makes an excellent point in there in her dissent, and this is one of her famous lines, I think, and that is, getting rid of the Voting Rights Act because you think things are better than they were is like throwing your umbrella out in the rain because you aren't getting wet. And I think that kind of puts a pin in it, for me at least. I'm not going to go into these. I had some pretty egregious examples of the racism by Republican legislatures in 2015 calling black people just monkeys and things like just horrible stuff that, you know what, I decided I'm not going to go into because my brain deserves better than that right now.
And I mean, what I can say real quick is that we've seen ramifications on very recent elections. We saw it in the governorship election, gubernatorial election in Georgia, where what's his name, George or Brian Kemp defeated Stacey Abrams. There's quite a bit of evidence of purges and restrictive voter registration rules that affect minorities disproportionately compared to white voters, which could have very well helped Mr. Kemp win his election there. Obviously, we've gone over. We haven't gone over, but it's been well documented what's going on in Florida when it comes to felons after they are done with their sentence, being able to vote, or the difficulty for them to be able to vote. Again, and these are key states, and they're going to be key states in 2020. So this,
just to clarify what happened in Florida, there was a ballot initiative that passed dramatically saying felons should have the citizens came out and said felons should have their rights restored. And then I believe it was the legislature interpreted that to mean, well, they have to pay all their fines and their fees and stuff. And the problem is there are no records of the fine. Like there's no like centralized records for the fines and the fees. So it just created an entire fucking disaster. And of course, the people who should have their voting rights are going to be disenfranchised as a result. You know,
I think just what this says, going over the Voting Rights Act that was passed in 1965, is that we're not always going forward, right? When it comes to progress, when it comes to racial equity, when it comes to just literally the right to vote, we're not always advancing. We're not always creating a more perfect union. Sometimes we go back. And we can go way back, and this is what's going on.
Very far back.
Yeah, this is what's going on right now. We're not progressing, where we're going backwards. We're taking away rights from individuals simply because of the color of their skin or their background or their age, like what I mentioned with college. This is not progress, and if you're defending it, then it's probably because you have an ulterior motive. Maybe that motive is that you just want your party to win and your guy to win. Maybe it's something else. I hope that the people that defend it think about what that reason is. Anything else you guys want to share before we move on to our next topic? All right. Well, I thank you, Sam, for that. I love your history segment. I think we've got to work on a name, but we'll think of something soon. Connor,
I think
Daniel, thank you for your input there in regards to the hearing. We appreciate your knowledge in regards to that. But I'm sorry, Sam, were you going to say something?
I think History Time with Sam is fine with me. It sounds like a PBS show or something.
Yeah.
History Time with Sam.
Our listeners, if you're listening, give us what's our email address, Sam? I've never mentioned, but we do have an email address, right? Do you know it?
Friendly.reminderdthepodcast@gmail.com.
Okay, I'm going to start mentioning that more at the end of the show. But let's move on to our next topic. Daniel, you came across an interesting article that at first you wanted to share, but apparently you want us to hold off because you have an idea.
Gus, it is time to play conservative. What the hell are conservatives talking about trivia? Now, what we have here. What we have here is
actually.
Let's say you win a free subscription to the National Review to read all of Armand White's great review. Anyway, okay, this is an article called "The Antifa Film Syllabus" by Armand White. Gus, I don't know. Do you want to talk about who Armand White is, or should I talk about who he is?
Well, I'll just say what I know. As somebody who's been visiting Rotten Tomatoes since as far as I can remember, Armand White is basically like the troll, the movie troll when it comes to professional movie critics. He's the great contrarian. Anytime there's going to be a highly critical review, he's going to come up with his point as to why it's not good. His reviews are very enjoyable in the sense that they're just awfully written and they're hilarious. So I guess like any professional troll or hack that has just reached the pinnacle of his work, he's made his way to the National Review. So.
I actually didn't know he was a conservative before this, but yeah, he is. He's the kind of guy who writes, Schindler's List is post modern garbage, and the Transformers is the song of a generation. It is. I think he really does like the Transformers series. I think he is I think he's full of crap, to be honest. But
yeah,
apparently he was legit enough to get hired by the National Review, which isn't really saying much. But and he wrote this article about the Antifa movies, which I think this was just. Literally, he was like, well, I need to write, 1,000 words or whatever so I can get my check from the Koch brothers or whatever. Let me just write a list of movies that I don't like, loosely connected. And he kind of just tried to connect it. So the intro here says, lately, many Americans have recognized that the past several generations of students have been indoctrinated into notions on history and behavior taught by Marxism-infatuated educators that encourage a new kind of dissidence unrecognizable from the anti-war demonstrations of the 60s. I don't know what any of that means. Did you guys have a lot of Marxist professors? I mean, I think we all went to the liberal colleges, but I don't think I had a single Marxist or communist professor. But the National Review thinks every college professor is yeah, that's true. And they might be Bernie Sanders sort of milquetoast social democrats, most likely. I'm gonna skim some of this because it's kind of dumb. Movies have been part of these students. Here's where he's like, well, I'm a movie guy, so my meanderings about how the kids need to get off my lawn needs to turn back to movies. Movies have been part of these students' pop culture instruction and their political instruction. See, he complains about education and he's like, and also movies. It's just horribly, very poorly written. Here's a good line that I'm shocked that the editor didn't take out. Should bored college kids ever go back to school, hit the seminars alongside the fentanyl, they'll get a syllabus, a course outline similar. Yes, he did. He made a joke about fentanyl, the drug that is currently killing tens of thousands of people. Ha, you fucking college kids, always doing the fentanyl. I'm going to skip all this bullshit. He thinks these are 25 films that are causing Antifa to show up on your lawn and mess it up and kick over your lawn ornaments. So what I'm going to do is, his descriptions are so outrageous. I'm going to read the descriptions and I want you guys to guess the movie or try to. Some of these I'm going to have to blank out some stuff because he, talks about the movie. And it'll make it too easy, but I'm going to do my best to try to wing this. And you guys tell me if this is getting boring or whatever. Why don't you guys, first one to guess it, and I'll keep score, and you guys will win $7 million. Just kidding. All right. Comic book culture's subversion of heroism into nihilism took root with Blank's pompous seriousness.
The Dark Knight.
Blank's, good one. Yeah,
have you read this though?
No.
Has he seen The Dark Knight? Yes, we've all seen The Dark Knight. We all know that is the description.
Comic book and pompous, and I kind of immediately knew he was.
I thought it was going to be like Ender's Game or something.
You said comic.
All right, here. I'm sure you did say. All right, here's the next one. This one is okay. Hit Blank's most obsessively loved story became a how-to manual for people who are not sure who they are, but who are busy reconstructing themselves and each other to fit a kind of social ideal. That's Sight and sound editor Nick James nailing the degraded use of good filmmaking to negative purposes when Blank overtook Citizen Kane in 2015 as film culture's new favorite best film. Now, this is so... This literally looks like he just copied and pasted it from like one of his other articles because it doesn't fit the theme. It's from like 40 years ago, so I'm not sure how many Antifas are really watching this and get... It's Vertigo by Alfred Hitchcock. That classic Antifa movie. Yeah, I don't know.
So why did you say 2015?
I don't know.
Like that's when the consensus.
I don't know. I think that's when the blogs that he reads decided that Vertigo overtook Citizen Kane as the best film. Again, this guy is writing to anyway.
When
next
did that
one.
Happen? Like, when did Vertigo?
I'm telling you, the stupid blogs that this idiot follows decided Vertigo.
Honestly,
and Vertigo, he was like, "That's when it happened. It happened in 2015." Obviously,
I'm just gonna say Vertigo probably better than Citizen Kane. Maybe
than Citizen Kane, yeah.
I'm gonna
and also inspiring. We know that it is radicalizing thousands of Antifas every single day. This cruel study in psychopathology is a mashup of the both pop lore and social instability. Just as the stadium terrorism in The Dark Knight Rises echoed 9/11's apocalypse, Blank's new face of the millennium predicted the Black Lives / Antifa mobs and won an Oscar for it.
Panther?
Oh, wait, no, that Joker.
Didn't win an Oscar. Oh.
The Antifa mobs, yeah. Which I think that's incorrect. I think the mobs, the quote-unquote mobs, existed before the movie. And then the movies kind of took it from there. I think... Anyway. I think you probably agree with that one because here's another really weird one because
Armin White, we're on the same page. I don't like the Joker for those listeners, but for those listening, but I wouldn't put it in the words that he just did.
Guillo Pontecorvo's brilliant neorealist-style drama was first adopted by 60s militants as wish fulfillment. Since then, its misguided third-world sympathy only confuses anti-colonialism with diaspora retribution. Guest lecturers Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and Ilhan Omar, or whoever writes their sound bites. Obviously, he's talking about 1967's The Battle of Algiers. Obviously, that's what he's talking about.
Is he just stringing like conservative thoughts together like that don't like
are they don't even thoughts though?
And he has to just mention AOC and Ilhan Omar like
it's just meaningless garbage.
Is he a bot? Is this guy just a bot? Like
it does. Yeah.
This is a random. Here's the next one. A conservative random generator machine.
It just this is the one of those Twitter bots and the guys at the National Review are like, brilliant. This is brilliant.
This is beautiful.
A celebration of tech narcissist Blank taking revenge on the world, the envy of every Ivy League nerd and those who envy.
I know this. The Social Network.
Yeah, Social Network.
I mean,
Blank's nihilist carnival turned cinephilia against itself. Violence and sadism presumably made hip. Morality? What's morality? Pulp Fiction, 1994.
Yeah.
This is a good one. You'll be able to tell what this is because he will say how many movies are in this franchise. The Blank siblings expropriate notions on Black sexuality, queer studies hijacking Black liberation, in a 2-part fantasy using identity madness to justify political anarchy. That's right. He's talking about The Matrix Reloaded and The Matrix Revolutions. That famous 2-part sci-fi fantasy franchise.
Yeah, the 2-part. Not known for any other part in that franchise. Like, we all remember Matrix Reloaded and Matrix Revolutions, and that's it.
And you know, the Wachowski siblings have actually said very explicitly that the trilogy is about, not that it couldn't have, you know, borrowed notions of Black liberation, etc., but It's about being trans more than anything. So I don't know what Armand White is talking about. Okay. A switch on Old West heroism from Law and Order to modern violent psychosis. The film's felt hero is a serial killer.
Okay, I
hopefully
have no idea.
to the blank's everlasting regret.
It's a serial
That's right.
killer.
He's talking about No Country for Old Men and the hero Anton Chigurh, the unambiguous hero of that movie, which is apparently how this psychopath felt about it. One more. Go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say, like, do you think he watches these movies like from beginning to end, or?
I think this is a list of the only movies he has watched in the last several decades. This is it. He's like, these are the list of movies I've watched, and I hated them all. This and the Transformers, and he just loved the Transformers. Blank Souped Up Dystopia is really a comic book catalog sporting the uniforms and porta-john bric-a-brac of drug-addled autonomous zones. He's got to make it political. It's all about those autonomous zones. That's right. He's talking about Mad Max Fury Road 2015. That was all about autonomous zones or something.
What?
Yeah, that was.
I don't know. Armand White's brain is mush, but apparently he's cashing checks at the National Review.
Is he even alive? Are we sure that this is a person?
No, I'm telling you, it's a bot. He's always been a bot.
Yeah, it's just. Yeah.
I just love the fact that I feel like he just like watched Fox News for like 48 hours and just decided to go through a list of movies and just connect it to whatever he sees going on in Portland, Oregon. Like,
I mean, it really is just baffling what the hell he was thinking. Like, I mean, it's like I'm coronavirus. What could cause the coronavirus? Well, you know, there were a lot of Jackie Chan movies, so I'll just talk about how Jackie Chan caused the coronavirus, and the midi-chlorians caused. It's just sort of free association. But hey, I mean, hell, cash your check from the National Review to just sort of free associate and turn it in, and you know.
And again, as I kind of
they get to say they have a.
Well, when I just go back to earlier, like this feels like satire. This feels like parody, and there's still probably a good number of people reading the National Review and thinking, finally, somebody calling Mad Max for what it truly is.
I mean, are there though? Were people? Well, I guess
you know
yeah.
They did give people more credit anymore. Like, yes, there are. I'm going to say with certainty that yes, there are people that are doing that.
There's like people out there that are like, it really started to turn downhill after the Battle of Algiers and Vertigo.
Yeah.
That's when you knew we were screwed. It's like, shut up, Grandpa. Go away.
Hitchcock is the father of Antifa. You heard it here first. All right. Well, thank you, Daniel. That was both fun and severely depressing. But thank you for sharing. But that does
5 more things you probably didn't know about Susan Rice. I'm gonna read this.
Oh, okay. Just read it out loud from beginning to end. We have time.
Yeah. No.
We actually do not. But that does bring us to the end of our show. I thought it was a great episode. I really want to thank both Daniel and Sam. Thank you both so much for joining me once again.
Thanks for having
us.
And as always, I want to thank our listeners. And in fact, Sam, can you mention our email just one more time?
Yeah, it's friendly.reminder@gmail.com. We should make up a song to remember.
friendly.reminderthepodcast@gmail.com.
Yes, sir.